On the 28th of September, Afghans headed to the polls for the country's presidential election. The following day, videos began emerging online of ballot stuffing. People could be seen filling in and submitting multiple ballot papers. There was widespread concern about the impact of this apparent fraud on the results of the vote. Hasib Motaref works regularly with NGOs as an election observer. He tells us more from Kabul.
There are
lots of videos like this doing the rounds on social networks. And what they show is ballot stuffing. They prove that electoral fraud did take place during the election on the 28th of September. And in fact, a huge proportion of votes were fraudulent, despite a series of efforts in place to avoid that happening. I think that only a portion of the videos that show fraud taking place were posted on social networks. I'm certain that a large number of them haven't yet been published. And despite that, I've already uncovered about 100 of them. Most of these videos show fraud in favor of the incumbent president, Mr. Ghani. But some of these videos show ballot stuffing in favor of the current chief executive, Abdullah, and sometimes it's to the advantage of another candidate, Mr. Hekmatyar. Another problem we saw on election day was that telephone networks were down in most regions. That meant that election observers and workers at the Electoral Commission weren't able to flag up those irregularities.
Large-scale electoral fraud has long been a problem in Afghanistan. This year, in an attempt to tackle it, the country's electoral committee introduced the use of biometric signatures. Voters' fingerprints are scanned at voting centres. Their name is then associated with a unique barcode, which is printed and attached to their ballot paper.
Most of the ballot stuffing took place in rural areas, where the government has no power. Unfortunately, it's in those areas that a large portion of the votes were fraudulent. That means it's hard to trust results coming from these volatile regions. The Electoral Commission needs to clarify whether or not these votes were cast with a biometric signature. If they weren't, they have to be declared invalid. That would be a clear sign that those votes were fraudulent. Electoral law makes that very clear.
And if you're wondering why these people filmed themselves in the act of ballot stuffing, our observer has the answer.
The people committing this fraud are doing it for money, and to show that they actually did what they were paid to, they need to have proof. Another reason they film themselves is to have proof of the fraud that they can later sell on to rival candidates, looking to dig the dirt on their opponents.